Hey YouTube, welcome back. So today we're going to talk about part 2 of my birth story. As I previously said in the last one, if you're about to have a baby or you've gone through something traumatic during childbirth or you're nervous about childbirth and don't want to know what could go wrong, go ahead and exit this video. This is not the video for you. My childbirth experience, especially this one that I'm about to share today, was like especially traumatic to me. And so this will be my last child. This is my second and final birth story. It's a very short series, but yeah. Please go ahead and like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know if your birth experience, if you've ever had anything traumatic happen that you want to share, any advice for people that may be about to give birth, let me know. So, part 2. So, now we fast forward from July of 2020 when I had my daughter to November of 2021 when I had my son. So, well, before we get there, basically my daughter was 5 months old, and I was like, 5 months they start sitting up, eating solids and all that kind of stuff. So I was in my feelings, and I was like, oh, I want a baby again. It was so nice. Yeah, that didn't happen the second time. But the first time, I was all in my feelings. So I was like, okay. So I was like, it would be great to have my kids close together because then they could grow up with each other and be best friends and play together. Which, actually, fun fact, now that we're almost 2 years in or a year and a half in, my kids are actually very close. And they are best friends and they do play together all the time, pretty much all day. So it worked out as expected. But also now I have 2 toddlers. So there's that. But anyway, back to the story. So I get pregnant in February, and I find out I'm pregnant in February, and then I go ahead and then I go ahead and I go through my whole pregnancy. My whole second pregnancy was really easy, actually. I didn't have any worries or anything. Everything came back fine. There was we found out it was boy, and I don't think with my daughter, we had heart problems. We had to monitor her and get all these special scans. With my son, we didn't have to do that. So, so fast forward to November. Once again, I'm about 39 weeks pregnant. I go in for my appointment. They do the sweep. And after the first time getting induced, I knew this time I did not want to get induced. But I was talking to my doctor, and I was telling I had a doctor's group. So I was talking to my female doctor and my male doctor, and I was telling them about what happened the first time. And they assured me oh, I don't know how they did it in Georgia, but here in Florida, it's different. So I was like, okay. Well, against my better judgment, first I told them, I said, well, I don't want to be put on the induction schedule because they were really trying to heavily urge me to get an induction, but I knew I didn't want an induction. So I was like, I said, well, I don't want to be on the schedule, but if something comes open, then call me. That was I was 39 weeks, 2 days. So I was getting really, really close to my due date. So they ended up calling me a couple days later, and they tell me that on my due date, there's actually a spot that came open, or maybe it was a day or two after my due date. I thought for sure my son was going to come. I was like, we're not going to even go past 40 weeks. Well, we did. I think I ended up being 40 weeks in 2 days or something. So the time comes, and I go ahead, and at first I'm like, no, but then they're like, are you sure? I'm like, okay, sure, we'll give it another try, because the first time wasn't traumatic at all. I don't know what I was thinking. Clearly I wasn't thinking. So I go ahead and I sign up, and I go to the hospital the day of, and I have to be there, I think at 6 in the morning. So at 6 in the morning, I show up, and we're kind of delayed in the little security lobby area for a little bit, because in the hospital I went to, it like you had to go up the elevator to like this special room where they like take your photo, go through your bags, all that kind of stuff. Also, November 2021, still very much in COVID. So there's that. But at that time, the COVID rules were a little bit more relaxed. So while I was giving birth, I could only have my husband there. Well, I could only have one person, but other people could visit, but there was like a short window that they could visit, and I think they had to get their temperature checked at the beginning at like the downstairs lobby or something like that. So yeah, the rules were a little bit more lax. I didn't have to wear my mask while I was in labor as long as there was nobody in the room. The second a nurse or anybody came in the room, I had to put back on my mask. So we show up and the lady is doing my intake process, right? So, maybe you don't know. They go ahead and they get your name. They get you to sign all the release forms. If you have to get any anesthesia or anything, they go ahead and get your consent right there. And they go ahead, and I think probably the first thing that they do while I was signing the papers, they were putting the baby on the monitor. So at first, when I'm signing it's a lot of forms. It's like maybe 10 forms or something. So I'm signing like the first 2 or 3, and the nurse is just sitting there like helping and explaining to me the forms. And then she looks over at the monitor and she freaks out. She starts screaming, "Code blue," in the hallway. And I'm like, what's going on? Like, she was moving the monitor and it wasn't doing what she wanted it to do. So she starts calling down the hall. And that was even before they gave me anything. Right there, there was nothing. I was already kind of having contractions, but there was no heartbeat. And so they come in and they start flipping me all kind of ways. They're like, come on. They're moving the thing around and they're like panicking pretty much. And I'm panicking. I'm like, I didn't even do anything. We walk in. We didn't even get anything. we didn't even sign the forms yet. And so all these nurses come rushing in. They start flipping me around. Then finally, after a couple minutes, they're able to find the baby's heartbeat. So the nurses afterwards, they're trying to calm me down and they're joking. They're like, if you wanted to help with your intake, that's all you had to say. You didn't have to have an emergency. And the lady's just kind of like laughing. And it was honestly kind of like, just like a kind of moment, So after that happened, things kind of calmed down, and my morning/day nurse was honestly the best nurse ever. Like, she was great. I don't even remember her name, but she was 10 out of 10. She asked me for my birth plan. We put it up on the board. We talked about it. I told her that I do not want a C-section because I have been watching and reading all about maternal mortality, especially for women of color. And so I was like, I do not want a C-section under like any circumstances, unless somebody's life is in danger. I do not want it. She's like, okay. And she was telling me all the things we could try. So she gets me hooked up to the IV. I tell her about my last experience with the IV, so she was extra careful. And I didn't feel anything this time. She was able to do it first time. She was amazing. She got me everything I needed. She made sure she was very attentive. She came by my room a lot of times, actually, like more than any other nurse had ever come by my room. So she was great. She was asking me if I needed anything. She would go get the doctor if I had any concerns. She was wonderful. But then the end of the shift came, which was the turn for the worse. So before her shift ended, we went ahead and my doctor showed up and she put me on Pitocin and we started that. And at first, everything was going okay, but then, like, my body started reacting funny to it, and so did the baby. So she had to, like, turn it down some, and she was playing, like, this game the whole time where she would have to turn it up. She would leave it up for, like, maybe 20 minutes, come in, turn it down, because my son's heartbeat was just going, like, off the charts. It would either go, like, off the charts or, like, way slow. So she kept on, like, having to come in and check the whole time. So like I said, we really didn't have any problems. I was progressing pretty well. She was like, okay, I'm gonna go ahead and pop your water. So I was like, okay. The second she pop my water. I promise you, I had this feeling inside and it was horrible. I knew, like, when she did that, I knew that I messed up. Like, there was no going back. There was no anything, because at that point, it's too late. Like, they're not going to let you leave now. It's too late. And I had a feeling that something was going to go wrong, and it did. But anyway, so she popped the water, and immediately I had a bad feeling. So we were still going through the thing, and then all of a sudden, like, my son's heart rate, it was already kind of going up and down. It starts like going way down. So she comes in and she's like, I think I might have done it a little too soon. We need to, like, she was like, this belly monitor isn't working. So the first thing was like the belly, because they put like a band. They have like some ultrasound gel, and they put it on, and they put like the monitors over your belly on both sides, and they take like basically like some saran wrap tape, like it sticks to itself. They wrap that around your belly. So she was like, I'm not getting a good read on that monitor. I need to get a better thing on your son because his numbers keep fluctuating. So I'm like, okay. So she's like, I need to take a monitor and stab it into his head. So when he comes out, he might be bleeding a little bit, because I'm going to take a monitor and literally like stick it into his head so she could get a better read on what he's doing. And like, that's scary. Like, you're going to stab my unborn baby. Like, but she's a doctor. So pretty much I trusted her. So I was like, okay. No, I did trust her. I didn't pretty much trust her. I did trust her. So she did it, and that was working a lot better. It wasn't like a huge thing. It was like maybe a little teeny stick, and it had like several little, like a circle of monitor prong things around it. So she just put that in his head. And when he came out, he did have like a little teeny blood. Like, they were able to just take it out. It didn't hurt him or anything, but yeah, so they do that. And so then she tries that, and she's like, I think I might have did it a little too soon. So she's like, what we have to do is we have to put water back in. So basically they take like a saline solution, and they kind of like she had it so that it was running through a tube back in and adding more water so that he could like pretty much breathe and like calm down. So we had that going. We had that tube going. Then, well, maybe you don't know, whenever they induce you, they have to catheterize you. They have to put a catheter in. So then now I have that tube hanging, and that's taped to my leg, and then the other tube's taped to my leg, and then the monitor's hanging. So it was a lot of lines and things. And so then I come in. I mean, the anesthesiologist comes in, and he goes ahead and he does my epidural, because like, if I'm gonna do the whole, first of all, Pitocin makes your contractions way more intense than if you were to just naturally have contractions. So mine were very, very painful. So he came in, and he was like, I don't know if he was new. My friend actually had given birth 3 months prior to mine, and I'm pretty sure she got the same guy, because the same thing happened to her. Like, he literally yelled at her because she was moving, but she's having contractions, so like, she's gonna move. And pretty much with me, he just kept sticking me. He couldn't find whatever he was trying to find. Then my back started leaking like clear liquid. So then basically I had to go get his manager, and she had to come in, and so she had to keep checking on me during the whole thing to make sure like, I was okay. She came in afterwards asking me questions like, are you going to do a lawsuit on us or something? Because after 3 days afterwards, I still couldn't pretty much walk. Like, it was very painful for me to walk. So he messed up my epidural, but at first it was working great. Like, I didn't feel anything, which isn't normal. You're supposed to feel a little bit of contractions. It's not supposed to hurt, but you're supposed to know that like it's contracting, right? So my doctor came in, and she was like, oh, how is it? I said, this is wonderful. I'm not feeling any pain. She said, you're not feeling any pain? I was like, no. She's like, are you feeling the contractions? I'm like, no, I'm not feeling anything. Basically, I was just numb. And she was like, oh, well, that's wrong. We have to turn it down. Yeah, we have to turn it down. I'm good. She's like, we have to turn it down. So she turns it down. And from that moment, it was never right again. Like, whatever she did, she had to keep coming and turning it up and down, turning it up and down. And it just it wasn't working. Like, I felt everything. Like, I was in there screaming in pain, and it was awful. Like, they had to keep, so the hospital beds are like really cool. They can kind of like go up. So they had to keep putting my hospital bed in like the standing position. I had to be on all fours. Then somebody else came in and was like, with that epidural in your back, you shouldn't be on all fours. Like, the new anesthesiologist came on shift, and he was like, you should not be moving around like that. And I was like, this is the only thing I can do because it is really hurting. So yeah, so that's going on. I'm in pain. My husband, he's like, are you sure? Because like at that point there was nothing they could do. They were like, we're not giving you any more pain medicine. I kept on calling for pain medicine. They would not give me any. They didn't really take my pain serious, which is something else I will say. If you are in pain, you know you're in pain, okay? Like, don't let anybody try to convince you that you're not in pain, or that it's not as bad, or that there's nothing wrong. If you feel it, you know your body better than anybody else. So they kept telling me that with what I was on, they were not going to give me anything else, and that my epidural was up as much as it could be. And I was in like excruciating pain. Like, I was in tears. The nurses were trying to help me. They kept getting the new anesthesiologist. He's like, I'm not signing off on it because she's already taking everything else. I'm not doing it. So I just had to sit there in pain. So my husband was like, do you mind if I like take a nap? I was like, no, go ahead. So I was in labor with my son from 6-ish in the morning. No, I think they finally started everything and like giving me everything around like noon. So like noon to, he was born at like 12:50 or something. So I was in labor with him about 12 hours. It went a lot quicker than with my daughter, but he was like, do you mind if I take a nap? I'm like, sure. So he takes a nap, and I'm just in pain. Like, I have the peanut ball, I'm standing up, squatting. It's not working. First of all, if you can stand with your epidural, there's a problem, okay? You're not supposed to be able to do that. That's not normal. So I called the nurse. So like I said, there had been a shift change. So these new nurses, they weren't coming by or whatever. And I was like, this is very different than the care I just got this morning. So before all this, before my husband took a nap, I was like having a panic attack. So my numbers were going crazy, and in turn my son's heart rate was going crazy. So they're like, we need to get you to calm down. And when I'm having a panic attack, I'm having a panic attack. There's like nothing anybody could do except for like, I have to calm myself down. So they get the doctor, and she's like, you need to calm down. What's going on? So I told her, like, I have a feeling that this is going to end up in a C-section, and I don't want a C-section because, and I told her all the stuff I watched and all the things I read about women of color having a higher mortality rate. She was like, well, my doctor is actually a woman of color, and so was the whole staff. She was like, everybody on the staff is a woman of color, and I'm a woman of color. We would never let anything happen to you. And I was like, when she said that, I kind of had a feeling that that made my panic a little bit worse, because that was terrifying. Like, yeah, that's true, but I had gotten the worst care that night that I think I've ever gotten at any hospital. Like, so yeah, after arguing with everybody in there about this pain medicine and literally everything else. So I calmed down, and then my husband asked to take a nap. He starts taking a nap, and I'm in pain. I'm trying not to scream because I didn't want to wake him up. So I'm just like in there bawling. So I keep pushing the button. And finally, after like the 5th or 6th time pushing the button, then a nurse comes in. And the lady next to me, I had heard that she had a baby. Like, you can hear everybody else and what they got going on in the rooms. So I heard that she had her baby maybe like 2 to 3 hours before mine. So I'm pushing it, and like I said, maybe the 5th or 6th time somebody comes in there, and I'm telling her what's wrong. And she's like, well, the anesthesiologist guy, he's the head of anesthesiology, and so there's nothing else we could do. And he said he's not going to give you any more pain medicine. And I was like, well, I need more pain medicine. something's not right. So she's like, well, I can go get your doctor and she can come down here and she can go ahead and maybe she can convince him to order you more pain medicine, right? So she goes and she's gone for maybe like 10 or 15 minutes and I'm just in pain. And she comes back and my doctor comes down with her and she's talking to me. She's like, oh, I see you're in pain or whatever. She's checking me and she looks at the monitor and the monitor is flatlined for my son. It's just flat. And she's like, she didn't say that at first. She's just like, how long has this been like this? The nurse lady's like, I don't know. This is Teresa's room. And so she's like, well, her baby's heartbeat has been off for 6 minutes. And she's like, oh, she's like, code blue, code blue. She starts screaming in the hallway, code blue. That's the second code blue that day. And so she's screaming, about 20 to 30 people rush in. My doctor is like screaming at me. She's like, we need to get you into an emergency C-section right now. Do you consent? I'm like, no, I don't want a C-section. She's like, I was like, I need to think about it. She said, you don't have time to think about it. Your son's heart has been off the monitor for 6 minutes. He needs to come out right now. And my husband wakes up and he just wakes up to everybody running in the room. So he's confused. And so she's like trying to convince him to tell me to do it. And he's like, what's going on? And I'm like crying because I didn't want a C-section. She's like, this is taking too long. Let me just try one time. Well, she was like, let's try to push. So I pushed. It didn't. She's like, you need to push a lot harder. I'm like, I'm literally trying. I'm in a lot of pain. And it didn't work. So then she was like, let's start wheeling. And so I'm crying. And so she's like, let me try one more thing. So she grabs the little vacuum thing. She unplugs my son from his little head monitor thing. And she takes the vacuum and she puts it on his head and he just comes right out. He slides right out, which was great because I didn't have to have the C-section. But there was a whole bunch of people in the room and it was a highly stressful situation. So I get my son out and I weigh him and everything. And he comes back and my son was born a little different. I don't know if I share that on here, but he's fine. Now he's fine. He had to have a surgery, but he's fine. But yeah, so then they go ahead and they take us back to this room. And another thing I want to say is, if you feel like you're being treated unfairly, you probably are. Like, I would never recommend this hospital to anybody ever. So it's November. Like I said, it's the end of November, almost December time. Yeah, so we go into this room. Like, first of all, they were like, oh, she was asking them what happened, like, outside the door. And they were like, oh, well, we were wheeling the other lady down to the, the postpartum care unit or whatever. And she's like, well, y'all can't do that. Somebody needs to be covering the monitors at all times because this happens. Like, and they were just like, oh, blah, 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 blah. So then they come in and they start wheeling. They put me and my son in a wheelchair. And, we do the whole afterbirth thing, of course. And then they start wheeling us down. And they put us in this room at the end of November. Yes, we live in Florida, but it was still cold. The room has no heat. They take us like the old wing and it has no heat. And they're like, this is kind of ridiculous that this is the only room. We want to see if we can move you. We're going to talk to the head nurse. And I was like, why would you even think that it was okay to put me in a room with no heat with a newborn baby? They're like, we'll bring you some extra blankets. That's the best we can do. I'm like, so I really should have caused the scene, but I didn't. I just kind of like, I think I was more so like in shock and kind of just happy that my son was alive at that point. So I was like, okay. They kept on, like, I did ask about it and they were like, we're going to put in the thing with the head nurse, but I don't know. And I was like, all right, so okay. I meant to leave a review. I guess it's not too late. I still could. But anyway, so yeah, we are in that room. There's no heat in there. It's cold. I have a newborn and he almost died just, he pretty much, yeah, like his heart was pretty much done for like 6 minutes, which most people would not be able to come back from that. Or at least he was off the monitor. And that's like really dangerous that nobody noticed that. So I say all that to say, make sure you are getting the care that you deserve, okay? If you go in somewhere and they're not treating you right, or the second you feel like they're not treating you right, speak up. Because this kind of stuff happens. That could have ended a whole lot worse if I wasn't in so much pain. I think that was my body warning me that like something was wrong. So definitely speak up, okay? Don't just take whatever somebody says and just accept that, because somebody's life could be in danger from that. But yeah, pretty much that's the story. Yeah, I mean, so if you have any experience that you want to share, any comments that you would like to leave, please go ahead and leave them in the comment section below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And I guess we'll see you in next week's video. I don't know what it'll be. We'll see. Have a good day. Bye.